All right, it's 10:30 here at East Coast time, and you're tuned in to a webinar sponsored by the United Coalition for Advanced Nuclear Power. I want to welcome everybody. My name is Lucian Niemeyer. I'm one of the co-founders of the United Coalition for Advanced Nuclear Power, or we call ourselves UCAN Power. I'm actually thrilled to be dialing in and calling in to moderate the next 90-minute session from, believe it or not, General George Washington's Revolutionary War skiff in downtown Old Town Alexandria, Virginia. So on the anniversary of the 250th anniversary of the birth of our country, I'm proud to be presenting on an incredible issue for us, which is and really an amazing issue, the rebirth of nuclear power in the United States to meet the increasing power demands of our country. Um, the United Coalition, next slide, the United Coalition is proud to have been serving our country and as a interagency or nonprofit, bringing together all types of stakeholders to advance the deployment of nuclear reactors in the country, both with federally deployed and commercially deployed. So we've been around since 2022. We conduct a series of webinars as part of our mission, in addition to writing executive orders and policy papers and op-eds. Please check out our website. You'll see our latest activity, particularly with the Department of War report. But we also hold webinars with important decision makers and leaders on important topics. So we are thrilled today to have both Senator Bill Hagerty and the chairman of the NRC joining us today for a conversation. So I would like to just recognize in the beginning, while we are sponsored by other associations, we do take sponsorships for our podcasts. So next slide, if you would we want to recognize our primary sponsor for our podcast, Cybernetic Intelligence. We also want to recognize Atomic Bee and ALO. And we do take additional sponsorships to be able to carry on the podcast that we have done over the last year and a half. If we've up to over 40, next slide, 40 guests. So if those of you on this podcast, on this webinar, would like to inquire about speaking through our podcast, please let us know. But we've had an amazing array of leaders in the nuclear power industry join us over the last year and a half. So this webinar is not necessarily the culmination. It's just the next chapter and us getting the word out across the country and what is happening in the world of nuclear power. And we're just thrilled to be able to talk to the NRC today. Before we do that, I would want to take a moment to introduce a special guest for us, Senator Bill Hagerty from Tennessee. Elected in 2020, currently serving in his first term in the boom state of Tennessee with a strong nuclear power to speak about what's happening in the country of nuclear power. He is prior to his election in the United States Senate, he served as an ambassador to Japan and really an important ally for us in developing nuclear power in this country, as well as the work we're doing within the country of Japan. He's a lifelong businessman with success of growing jobs and revenue for a wide range of companies. He's also served the state of Tennessee on the governor's cabinet and as the commissioner of the Tennessee Department of Economic and Community Development, leading the strongest economic transformation for Tennessee seen to date. #1 state in the nation for jobs created through foreign investment, and State of the Year for Economic Development for 2 years in a row under his tenure. Sir, now you're using your private sector expertise in the Senate, Banking Committee, Housing and Urban Affairs, Foreign Relations, Appropriations. It's an honor to have you open up this webinar with some insights on where do you see nuclear power going for the country. More importantly, where is the state of Tennessee leading on that? So I'll go ahead and turn it over to Senator Hagerty for some opening comments, and then I'll have a couple questions.
Well, thank you, Lucian. I very much appreciate that kind introduction. And I just want to say we're truly at a pivotal moment here in America. If you think about the opportunity to lead, whether it is in AI, advanced manufacturing, the entire national security infrastructure that we're working hard to put in place is moving very rapidly. And I think we're at a place right now where the United States is at the forefront of opening the next chapter of leadership in terms of energy here in the United States and putting us at the forefront of the world. If you think about what's happening with advanced reactors, with SMRs, the amount of activity that's going on, we're seeing ourselves, not just in Tennessee, but across the nation, but particularly in Tennessee. I'm encouraged because we're moving now from PowerPoint presentations in my office, from demonstration projects to actually going vertical with real deployments. And if you think about it, Congress and the administration are working hand in hand now. And this hasn't always been the case, but we're working hand in hand to truly modernize the regulatory framework necessary for us to lead in energy. And we're looking at making certain that we are able to license nuclear technologies in a way that is safe, yet also efficient, and being done in a way that delivers far greater predictability. And with that greater predictability comes the ability, therefore, for private sector investment to come in, massive private sector investment, by the way, to support the leadership position that we're trying to attain. And if you think about it, the stakes could not be any higher. We're in a global competition right now, and the United States cannot afford to come in second place. We have to lead. We need to become the standard. We have all of the building blocks to make this happen. If you think about it, we've got the technology, we've got the talent, and importantly, we now have the political alignment necessary to deliver a regulatory framework that will help us become the leader of the world. Now is the time to act. We have to move from, again, being planners to being developers and operators. And the capacity to do that certainly exists here in America. And frankly, it's on display nowhere more important than in Tennessee. If you think about the ecosystem that is developed there and the long history that exists in Tennessee around Oak Ridge and with the TVA support, University of Tennessee, et cetera, what you see is an ecosystem that is there to support American leadership. And you've got at a state level, tremendous leadership as well. Governor Lee has put in place a $70 million nuclear energy fund. Given the grand scheme of things and the amount of investment that's required, it's not a large amount of money relative to the billions that are coming in, but it demonstrates the fact that the state is moving in a direction to be as supportive as it possibly can be for the entire ecosystem for nuclear energy. So I couldn't be more excited about what's happening. You look at TVA, what's happening at Clinch River there, the massive Japanese investment that's coming in, investment that's coming from all over the world, frankly, resident there in East Tennessee, because, again, we have these building blocks, we have the capacity. I think we're finding ourselves along a path where America can truly be at the lead of a new energy renaissance. And I'm honored to be able to play a role in that here in the United States Senate. And I appreciate the input, the coordination, and the leadership coming from those of you that are on this call. So thank you again, Lucian. Thanks for the introduction, and I'm happy to answer a few questions.
Yeah. So first of all, love what is happening in the state of Tennessee. Moving forward in the Senate, what do you think? What more can we do with policy, public policy, to advance the cause? You know, the executive orders were pretty powerful. I personally found them pretty aggressive as far as the timelines. But oh my Lord, I think we're actually may get the criticality for a couple of reactors by July 4th, which I never thought could have happened a year ago. From your perspective, Senator, what would you like to see policy on the Senate side and congressional side moving forward to advance this?
Well, one of the simple things, it sounds simple, but it's nothing simple up here, is just reorienting, for example, the leadership of the Tennessee Valley Authority. You know, the first permit to do an SMR exists there at Clinch River. Getting the leadership aligned and in place and moving at a pace where we really are focused again on nuclear, focused again on leadership is happening. But it's taken Senate action to work with the White House to put in place a new board of directors and new leadership that help move us in that direction. Again, that's not a legislative solution, but that is supporting the direction that we're going. And I look at what I just met this morning with my staff to cover what we're going to do in the National Defense Authorization Bill. And I've got a number of priorities that aim directly at our nuclear capacity in my home state of Tennessee, but broadly more supportive to the entire effort, again, to drive leadership in this area. So looking at must-pass bills, being able to incrementally add there, the appropriations process. I serve in the appropriations committee,
You
doing
do.
in that regard to be supportive of the development of this ecosystem. And frankly, just spending time. I talk regularly with Nieh, who's now the chair of the NRC. He's putting in place really a cultural change at the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, and think the orientation now is towards speed and safety. You can do both; they're not mutually exclusive. There's a realization of that right now, and what I've seen is a dramatic lift in the pace of play of the bureaucracy here. And what you want is for our regulatory framework to become a source of advantage, not to become a brake on our capacity to lead. And that's the shift that we're seeing. And that a lot of that is cultural and behavioral as much as it is anything that we can do from a legislative perspective. But please know that I'm trying to do what I can legislatively to support that, and then communicating directly with members of the administration and the regulators to let them know how important this is to me and to those of us here in the Senate that want to see America lead in energy. They've got the opportunity to shine right now, and we're trying to support that.
Yeah, Chairman Nieh, you're gonna have to close your ears for a minute. But what I've seen, Senator, is in the past where the Senate has had to pass legislation to get the NRC to actually innovate and move forward. Now that's no longer the case. You got a chairman in there that says we're going to do this, and we're going to do, we're going to do change that culture, and that's good because I think there has been some frustration in Congress in the past. I'm a 11-year veteran of the Senate Armed Services Committee professional staff, and I know there's only so much you can do with legislation to get a organization to want to change. Sometimes it's just got to come from within. And I think what I've seen, at least in the last few months under the leadership of Chairman Nieh, that we are starting to see that a much more proactive reaching out, looking for ways to innovate. I'm thrilled by what we see with digital technologies. Digital twins, I think, is the way of the future for the NRC. You're starting to see, DOE participating in Prometheus. You're starting to see money start moving in the direction of how can we accelerate that. And I agree. I think we want to keep the pressure on from Congress, but we are seeing some significant changes. What I'm amazed by
Before
is,
that, Lucian, and I saw Chairman Nieh on the call here.
yeah,
Again, you don't have to close your ears, but the compliment is due. He understands and has experience in the agency, and I think that gives him unique credibility to
yes.
come in and affect the type of cultural shift that he's overseeing right now. He's getting dramatic results, and I've got to believe that puts a lift in the step of everybody that's there who wants to see America lead. So it's refreshing, I'm sure, at the commission to have him in a leadership position. You marry that with Chris Wright, and what an appropriate title for Chris Wright as Secretary of Energy. That guy has more energy than most anybody you could ever meet. And I just think the fact that we've got seasoned leaders in positions both at DOE and at the NRC who understand the direction that we're trying to go and have the capacity and the experience set to drive us there is unique. It's a unique time, and we're very fortunate to have that type of leadership in the executive branch.
And looked at one of the biggest parts of the country, Oak Ridge, and then you've also got Arnold too. The Air Force would like to put a nuclear reactor in Arnold, but Oak Ridge seems to be just taking off on a whole slew of nuclear activities. I know the DOE would like to put some reactors down on the Oak Ridge Reservation. They're working on that right now. I've talked to Secretary Wright about that. But man, Oak Ridge, I'm being asked to come down and talk by Zach Wamp, I'm sure a mutual friend of ours, to talk in the end of July out at Oak Ridge. And it is incredible what's happening on that reservation. And I know you're a big part of that, continuing to support Oak Ridge, along with Congressman Fleischman. And it seems like there is a lot of leadership at the federal level in Tennessee, really focusing on where Oak Ridge can serve our nation.
Well, I was just down there recently touring Kairos' Hermes project, and it's just it's so wonderful to see vertical activity now. Again, I've seen plenty of PowerPoint presentations talking about what might be, but now that we're seeing these projects coming out of the ground, we're seeing a workforce that we've got there, continuing to demonstrate their capacity. And I would just want to remind people on the call that may not be familiar with Oak Ridge, the history dates back to the Manhattan Project. I meet people there every time I go who are the third and fourth generation of a family that are working in this industry, and they are just so excited to see the kind of energy and leadership that we're bringing to bear. You also mentioned Chuck Fleischman. Chuck is the congressman that has Oak Ridge in that area. Chuck has encyclopedic knowledge of what's going on that campus. He is dedicated to this like nobody else. I have a great partnership with him and just find him an invaluable colleague as we work to try to drive this forward. And I think that for those of you on this call that don't know Chuck, You should get to know him. For those of you that do, I'm sure you're nodding your head in agreement with me.
Yeah, well, not Congress. It's not the congressman's. You, sir, too. With your role in appropriations. I mean, Tennessee is well served by having an engaged local delegation at the House level as well as the Senate level. So I think that's just a powerful combination, and together you can get a lot done for the state of Tennessee. And look, Oak Ridge, not just in nuclear power, but also in nuclear weapons support. I mean, the wide range of mission sets there, and more importantly, is I've seen billions of dollars of programmed investment through various programs in DOE into Oak Ridge. So it's going to grow. It's not just where it's at today, but ultimately why we need Oak Ridge as a national treasure, and we need to continue to invest in the capability of Oak Ridge. So I'm
All
looking
right.
forward to my trip down there. I know you've made plenty of trips to Oak Ridge, and the goal is, okay, how can we align appropriations in the next 5 years to truly meet out those construction requirements to modernize the facilities and expand them to be able to meet the needs of our country. And we need it across the board. Our nuclear industrial base is atrophied. We've let a lot of facilities go by the wayside or be delayed because we counted on the Russians for fuel, or we counted on this, and we need to rebuild that very quickly. I see Oak Ridge just growing significantly over the next 5 to 10 years.
Well, my hope, and I think that's certainly shared. I've shared this with the president, and I think he agrees. We want to make Oak Ridge, we want to make East Tennessee, we want to make Tennessee, frankly, the crown jewel in our energy policy. And certainly, if you think about it from the Chinese perspective, it's a thorn in the side of the Chinese to see this kind of progress happening back on American soil. If you think about the competition that we're in, and this is a competition where energy is a key input, whether it's AI, advanced manufacturing, the many things that we're going to find ourselves competing on a global basis are going to be driven by the ability to generate the energy necessary to do that. And leading in nuclear is just a critical aspect of our capacity to deliver on that front. The TVA, again, I think is oriented in the right direction right now. They've gone through a pretty significant leadership change. And what we're going to see there is a partnership, if you will, between the TVA, Oak Ridge, the state of Tennessee, and the federal government, particularly the DOE, that's really going to help, an incredible ecosystem in the right direction.
Yes, sir. One of the things that UCAN does is we get asked to speak around the country, and I'm not sure as many folks as should on the private side are talking about what I believe is accurate. The president declared a national energy emergency on January 20th, 2025, recognizing that we need to generate more power as a country. Our supply has been stagnating for various reasons, and we can talk about that. But bottom line is we need to reverse that. Our supply now needs to go. Nuclear power is a core aspect of that, but we've got to look across the board. How do we generate the gigawatts we're going to need to be competitive with China? Right now, we're competing with them on data centers, but they are killing us on generating power 10 times as much as new generation as we are per year. And so that is one of the reasons why we are so compelled in our organization to want to promote nuclear power of all sizes, because we've got a race on energy. We have to win, not just on data, but on power itself. And I'm not sure the country's paying attention to that as much as they should. That we need, that we're in a dire straits where our demand's going way up past our supply.
Well, it's absolutely true the way you articulated it, and the competition is very real. But the way China has to compete is by adding new coal plants, and they're doing that at a dramatic pace. The way we're competing in the near term is adding, new gas-fired, but building longer term the nuclear capacity that'll be there for decades. And we just going to have to take an all of the above approach to make certain we're leveraging every technology and staying at the forefront. If you look at what's happening, in the fossil fuel arena, Tennessee is a beneficiary of what's happening in other parts of the country because of the technology developments in natural gas production. And we're not sitting, idly by. TVA is adding significant capacity in that regard, and have just put out their forward-looking plans. There's going to be certainly nuclear capacity added, but there's going to be a lot of natural gas capacity added in the very near term to make certain that we stay abreast of the demand and that we continue to lead. The minute we take our eye off the ball from an energy standpoint, China again steps back into the fore, and as I said before, we can't come in second. here. We just can't afford to do that. And I think the more that this group can help broadcast that public awareness can be driven in that regard, it's going to be very helpful. The other thing that I see, and I don't think it's on the direct agenda here, but there is tremendous resistance, if you will, to data centers, and those people that are running the data centers that utilize this energy, I think, need to do a better job of communicating broadly, against the misinformation that I see out there. And there's just a lot of false information about water usage, pollution, et cetera, et cetera. Largest hyperscaler in America, right in Tennessee. That's XAI's operations over near Memphis.
Yes,
and
sir.
we're happening real time. We can deliver this in an effective manner, an efficient manner, and one that's very, very kind to the environment. And again, you see data center projects being killed all over with carefully orchestrated, communications campaigns done in social media, non-governmental organizations coming in that are from out, somewhere else, and
Yes, sir.
campaigns. And I don't know where they're funded, what kind of dark money's behind it, or even what country they come from, but I can guess. So again, I think there's a communications opportunity, and I'll put it in the positive, to explain not only the need for power and the need to be in a position to step up and meet that demand, but the entire ecosystem that leads us to a leadership position in every aspect: AI, robotics, advanced manufacturing, quantum. All of this are areas where we need to lead, and energy is at the core of our capacity to do it.
Yes, sir. And look, you're right. It is off topic, but it is core to what I'm working on. And you're right. You've got the XAIs of the world. Building Colossus in Memphis, now ultimately leasing it to Anthropic. I mean, there is a need for AI in this country. And whether how we build it, I live in Northern Virginia, more data centers than anywhere in the world. I understand there's a community concerns, but we've got to work proactively to address those community concerns and continue to build this important part of our national economy that's going to fuel us in the future. And what I see incredible, if you'd have told me 3 years ago that a hyperscaler would pay to open up 3 Mile Island, they call it the Crane reactor now, but nobody would have ever thought that you've got a private entity that wants to open up a notorious reactor, or complex because they need the power. But that's where we're at, and it's not necessarily about.
You're revealing your age, Lucian. Not many
Yes, sir.
people remember 3 Mile Island.
Yes, sir. I know. Hey, I'm from Pennsylvania. Definitely remember 3 Mile Island. But you look at the president's pledge on, behind the meter generation, it has to be nuclear power. And it's not micros. It could be AP1000s. It could be, GH300s. It could be anything. But the key is we've got private sector investment, not just utilities, that are saying, hey, we need to do this. We need to invest private dollars to build nuclear power. It's an exciting time seeing that happen in addition to what utilities are doing.
Indeed.
Yeah. So I don't want to take up too much of your time. It has been a thrill and an honor. One question we did get from the audience: nuclear. There's a lot of partisan issues in Congress right now. Nuclear power is not one of them. What would you recommend as we're reaching out to a wider audience in Congress? I mean, it seems to be there's a caucus. I know Senator Reishan, Senator Warner are there. Is there a way to grow that? I mean, is that something that?
Yeah, I think, Lucian, if you just keep your eye on the communications ball here,
Yes, sir.
to communicate the benefits of leadership, and frankly, there is bipartisan support for remaining competitive in China. And if you focus on the international competitiveness of the United States, the fact that energy is an absolute critical component to lead it, I think that's where the focus has got to be. You don't have to say this, but I think keep in mind what's happened to Europe. They focused on all the wrong metrics, and they've fallen behind dramatically. Their GDP is pathetic compared to ours, their growth rate, I should say. They've regulated themselves into obscurity. They don't innovate. They don't lead anymore. And they're desperate for energy because they became dependent on Russia for that. Just as you mentioned, we were overly dependent as well on our adversaries. So the world is waking up. I think we're in a far better position than most to look toward the next phase and make it productive. And I think communicating that across the board is going to be critical. Thank you so much for having me, Lucian.
Yes, sir. Thank you for your leadership. Appreciate it very much.
Thank you.
All right. Moving on. It is an honor right now. We've had the chairman listening in to introduce the Honorable Nieh, designated as the chairman of the NRC, Nuclear Regulatory Commission, by President Trump on January 8th, 2026. but it's not his first opportunity to serve in the NRC, serving our country. He was previously sworn in as the NRC commissioner in December of 25 for a term ending in 29. He is the first former NRC chairman uh, to actually have served as an inspector and a commissioner. So he brings an incredible amount of background. Immediately prior to his appointment, he actually served as an officer of the Southern Nuclear on loan to the Institute of the Nuclear Power Operations INPO. He joined Southern in 2021 to assume the role of Vice President for Regulatory Affairs after more than 20 years of NRC staff member experience. While at the NRC in staff, Director of the Office of Nuclear Regulation, Senior Resident Inspector, and many other roles. He also worked at the Knowles Atomic Power Lab as a civilian instructor for the Navy's nuclear power program. Most importantly, which I'm thrilled by, he is a proud graduate of the United States Naval Nuclear Power School. So we'll have a chance to hear from him in just a minute. Interviewing him will be Mr. Jeremy Harrell, who is the executive officer of ClearPath and ClearPath Action, a DC-based conservative clean energy organization advancing policies that accelerate American innovation to reduce global energy emissions. And I can't think of a more powerful power source than nuclear power to meet that demand. As CEO, Jeremy aligns public policy, philanthropy, advocacy, coalition building, communications, political initiatives to drive measurable, tangible results. He's also a national expert on energy innovation, technology, commercialization, export financing, and regulatory modernization, having testified before Congress at the federal level and also at the state level for many years. So, Jeremy, I would love for you to open it up with some comments and then turn it over to your interview and fireside chat with Chairman Nieh.
Excellent. Well, Lucian, thank you for the very kind introduction. Thanks for everyone for making the time to join us today. And thank you to the UCAN team, ultimately, for creating this medium and really furthering the conversation on nuclear power. My name is Jeremy Harrell. I'm the Chief Executive Officer of ClearPath. And as Lucian described, we work on accelerating American innovation to meet our energy needs. And so it's everything from how do we scale new advanced nuclear technologies to how do we make building blocks of the economy like steel, cement, and chemicals in an affordable and lower emission way. And nuclear, for the last 10 years where I've been at this organization, has been a signature pillar of what we're working on. And it's incredible to see how this environment and ecosystem has rapidly changed, and we're truly at this precipice moment in the United States. U.S. energy demand is skyrocketing, and 2026 is this pivotal moment for how the U.S. can produce more energy, make it affordable, and do it in a lower emission way. We have to meet rising demand. We need to accelerate American innovation. We need to grow American manufacturing, and we ultimately need to keep energy affordable for the consumers. And there's been a lot of exciting action over the last 18 months, particularly in nuclear energy. No longer are we talking about nuclear energy in PowerPoints, as the senator talked about, or press releases that aren't tangibly leading to steel on the ground. New nuclear is happening now. We have multiple reactors in this country under construction and moving forward. The senator mentioned at least one there in Tennessee. We're seeing billions of dollars invested in the nuclear fuel supply chain. We're seeing 3 nuclear reactors previously shuttered in the past reopened, and we're seeing innovation raced towards the marketplace. And the NRC is critical to all of this work as we look to scale new nuclear and also meet the president's goal of 4xing nuclear by 2050. A nimble, predictable, efficient regulator that enables innovation and safely enables deployment is going to be essential. And so I want to dig right in with Chairman Nieh, and really honored to be here with you today, sir. We are on a convergence of sustained efforts over the last 10 years in bipartisan policy. The senator talked a little bit about this previously, not just in Congress. Obviously, major bills enacted into law like NEMA, the Advance Act in recent years that have been driving some of the NRC regulatory modernization. Strong leadership from folks like you within the agency, And at the presidential level, we've seen the President Trump make nuclear a signature piece of his energy strategy. We briefly discussed the EOs before, and we've seen some continuity too across government. I mean, the previous administration saw nuclear as an important piece of the puzzle. I mean, there may not be a technology that has more bipartisan support for nuclear. So I want to maybe get us kickstarted, Mr. Chairman, with one question because, as Lucian mentioned, your robust experience. What has changed the most in the last 5 years here in nuclear as you enter in this pivotal role as chairman? And what makes you most excited for this moment?
Yeah, well, thank you, Jeremy, and thank you to the UCAN organizers for this event. This is just such an incredible moment for American nuclear energy, and that is perhaps one of the biggest changes. I reflect back to my time at the agency in the early 2000s when there was a renaissance that never happened, and it was quite different than the circumstances we see today. And today we have unmatched levels of support for nuclear energy, as you pointed out, through the decisive actions of President Trump, the bipartisan support from Congress, the substantial capital investment into nuclear technologies, as well as growing interest from states, including, the great state of Tennessee, as Senator Hagerty pointed out, and the increased public support. So the conditions are ideal for America to lead the world again in nuclear energy. And this is why it's so important to have a regulator that is not an impediment. And there is a new NRC here. That's something that's very different. There's a new NRC that's emerged, one that enables this and accelerates the deployment of nuclear technologies. And NRC is not going to be an impediment. So there are a lot of things that we're doing in revising our regulatory frameworks to be that enabler. Again, building on the bipartisan legislation from Congress, as well as the actions from President Trump and the executive order for NRC reform. That executive order really was a major catalyst to these immediate actions that are delivering results at the NRC right now with the rulemakings that we're making, as well as some of the institutional changes we're making with our organization and how we conduct our licensing and oversight activities. So lots of changes. The other thing I'd really add to that is this enabling mindset that is growing at the NRC. That is something that has always been in the Atomic Energy Act, right? The Atomic Energy Act talks about the safety mission of the NRC, as well as executing its activities to maximize the general welfare of America. And that's what enabling is. And Congress, in a bipartisan fashion and through the Advance Act, made that part of the NRC's mission. And that's what's growing inside the agency today. So it's really just such a remarkable story outside the Beltway in terms of nuclear regulatory reform.
What surprised you the most when you returned to the NRC after your stint both in the private sector and at some key international agencies over recent years? How had the environment in the building changed when you walked back in the door?
For me, one awesome surprise is the alignment of the leadership team. Senator Hagerty talked about leadership. Many of the challenges that the NRC faced and the criticisms that the NRC has received over the years were never about the NRC's safety judgments and technical competence. It was all about NRC's execution. And when you have leaders that are aligned to a clear vision and direction, and the institutional mechanisms are in place to establish objectives and results and monitor progress, drive accountability, and support teamwork, that's what is really changing at the NRC. So we have a much more aligned leadership team. One of the things I'm bringing in from the private sector through my work at Southern Company, as well as the work I was doing with the Institute of Nuclear Operations, is to bring a disciplined management model to the agency for how we do business, along with the corresponding leadership behaviors that are needed to be demonstrated consistently across the entire enterprise. And in my decades at the NRC, I spent almost 24 years there before I left the agency. Just be frank, a lot of the results were really dependent on which leaders were in which roles. And sometimes the results were great, and sometimes the results really weren't. And we need to normalize that. We want to focus on what excellence looks like, have the institutional controls in place and the way we lead and execute really baked into how we do business so that we can deliver consistent results. So that's one change. And the other thing I already alluded to is the enabling mindset. You know, just jumping back for a really quick story, when I was last at the NRC as a director of Office of Nuclear Reactor Regulation, we embraced a vision that actually brought in the enabling mindset, and we actually wrote it on a wall in big letters. It was, we make safe use of nuclear technology possible, right? We make it safe and we make it possible. And there were some people that understood it and got it, right? They knew we were in a race against China for artificial intelligence, you know, energy security, as well as our national security. But the institutional headwinds that we were up against were pretty significant. But now that it's baked into our mission, it is really inspiring to see, you know, and as being a member of the commission with my four other colleagues on the commission, we're the wind in the sails of the staff now. They are just doing incredible work. You know, they've embraced this enabling mindset. So it's really, really awesome to see.
This enabling mindset really, I think, is the key difference that we see over the recent years. I mean, I think there's true energy you're hearing from the staff level. We're excited about this moment, right? They think they can be part of something big and
Yeah.
seeing U.S. nuclear future, and I think that starts with the top with your leadership.
And I'll mention something because you know the audience here may be thinking that enabling is some, you know, theoretical construct or esoteric concept, and let me try to make it more real. When I think of what enabling regulation is, enabling is aligning our regulations with actual risks and operational needs, right? Enabling is also adapting our regulatory frameworks to new technologies. It's not force fitting new technologies into old licensing frameworks that are no longer fit for purpose. And enabling is also adding regulatory flexibility where safety is maintained. So that is what you are seeing happening at the NRC.
Excellent. Well, there's a lot coming out of the NRC. I think
Yeah.
ClearPath is tracking at a little bit of the 10 big rulemakings to watch that have been coming down the pike in recent months, or really over the last year and a half. And obviously more than that is happening behind the scenes too. There's some folks who are out there who are saying, how can all this stuff get done at this one moment? And I think the argument we would make is this is kind of a precipice moment of things that have been in the works over the last few years, right? The legislative action that's happened, the prompting on things like Part 53, a lot of the more direct work that you have been doing post EOs. But this isn't just one sudden moment. This is something that's been building. How are you balancing that as chairman and trying to race to this modernization moment, ensure to preserve the critical work that's being done there, but be that enabler and ultimately finalize some of these big rulemakings that are going to be critical to scaling American nuclear here in the U.S.?
Yeah, I'll go back to another thing Senator Hagerty said about safety and speed. They are not mutually exclusive. It's something that I've been sharing internally and externally with within the agency and to others. And how we are not cutting corners. So I want to make that very, very clear. The one thing that has not changed at the NRC is our safety mission and our focus on our core safety mission. What is changing is how we work. And we're achieving both safety and speed, again, not by cutting corners or taking shortcuts. We're removing the things that unnecessarily slow us down. Conservatisms in our rules, right? When we look at rules that were developed 6 to 7 decades ago for technologies that we knew far less about then than we do today, where we had also, you know, much less sophisticated modeling and computational methods to, you know, analyze different technologies than we have today. So we're removing that out of our regulations and our programs. We're also applying risk-informed, performance-based approaches to really focus our attention on what matters most for safety. And you know, sometimes I get asked the question, "Hey, what are some myths that you hear in, you know, nuclear safety regulation?" I'll say two things here. One is taking more time to make a regulatory decision does not make it more safe, right? And also, more inspection does not mean more safety, right? We have to recognize those things. And drawing back from the experiences I had as an NRC licensee, being on the other end of a licensing review or being on the other end of an inspection, there are real things that are done that involve very low safety significant issues that end up being distractions to the NRC as well as its licensees, where attention and resources are spent on things that really don't materially contribute to public health and safety. Those are the things that we are going to just eliminate, right? That's how we do our work faster. We're shaving off months off of review times. Like, for example, TerraPower's Kemmerer Unit 1 construction permit was issued 9 months ahead of schedule. We did that by, right, we did that by adding flexibility in the licensing application and focusing our attention on what really matters most for nuclear safety and security. So that's how we're achieving these efficiencies. You know, it's not about lowering our standards at all. NRC has not lowered any standards for what is safe. It's really how we work and how we execute.
Mr. Chairman, I wanted to ask you about the executive orders,
Mhm.
and I think you've seen the past two administrations really be setting big goals. President Trump coming in with these EOs and setting a large target and really trying to drive
Yeah.
all of government towards these objectives. What has actually changed at the NRC since those executive orders were signed, and importantly, what has not? And how are you balancing that role that you all play as an independent regulator with what the other levers of the federal government are doing, the Department of Energy, the Department of War, to really help support the innovation that is ultimately going to come before you all?
Yeah. One of the big changes that was driven by the executive order was that, again, call for immediate action to focus a wholesale review of the NRC's regulations. So we have mobilized the workforce to really deliver on revising a whole suite of regulations for our licensing work. And we're doing that with a safety focus and doing our work with efficiency and speed. And you know, when I think about President Trump's order, his executive order for the NRC built on the direction and foundation laid by the Advance Act, which said, "Hey, NRC, you need to be more efficient and predictable in how you do your job." Trump's executive order said, "You know what? We need immediate actions now. Get the red tape out of the system." That is exactly what we're doing. So the NRC staff has developed already 21 draft rules. Several of them have been published for comment, so you could see the actual changes to our licensing frameworks, right? You saw the Part 57 microreactor rulemaking that was published. You saw changes published to the contested hearing process under Part 2. We just recently released major rulemaking for overhauling our security regulations, right? We're doing things not just for deploying new reactor technologies, but we're also doing things for the operating fleet as well. So very soon you're going to see rules come out for the existing reactor licensees related to some of the licensing programs that they will have access to, that again, to keep the operating fleet operating safely, securely into the long term without any unnecessary burdens. We are touching on the entire nuclear life cycle, right? I think about, you know, maybe earlier on you asked me, hey, what's different? You know, another difference is that this is an amazing moment for the federal government. That there is a deliberate and coordinated effort to reestablish America as a leader in nuclear energy again, right? The Department of Energy under Secretary Wright's leadership is investing in and developing the industrial base around the entire nuclear life cycle, front end all the way to the back end. And what NRC is doing is we are laying out new licensing frameworks that are credible, predictable, and timely to make that industrial base possible. So some other changes, you know, we've put out some new rules for the front end, right? The United States is too dependent on foreign uranium and enrichment. We got to close that gap. So we're doing things there. Other changes, Jeremy, major reorganization. So a week ago, last Monday, we completely reorganized the NRC. We eliminated an entire layer of unnecessary management in the bureaucracy to have us operate more streamlined and efficient, right? Because we can't just, you know, increase our budgets and costs to do this. We have to be able to work smarter, not harder. So we made a major reorganization of the agency. Another huge change, we streamlined our oversight program to maintain strong oversight, but risk-informed oversight. When I look at the years I've spent in this industry, I was in the old inspection program in the 90s and transitioned to the current inspection program that you see today. That transition happened in 2000, and for over 20 years, the level of resources has relatively stayed flat, right around 2,000 years or 2,000 hours per site, whereas industry performance has steadily increased over that time as well. So as a performance-based regulator, we made adjustments to the program. So we've made somewhere around 40 to 50% reduction in the level of inspection resources. It's not zero. It's still strong and robust. We still have resident inspectors at every power plant operating in the United States, and we will continue to have strong, robust inspection. And we will basically have our inspection program follow the performance of the industry. If the performance stays high, then we'll keep our inspection resources appropriate. If performance goes in the opposite direction, obviously the regulator would have to respond. And that's the agility that we have in the reactor oversight process. So those are just a handful of examples of some major changes happening at the NRC.
I mean, it's incredible to see the work that's
Yeah.
being done to really prepare for this moment. You talk about the global picture, and I think you very
Yeah.
uniquely have some experience here, having spent some time at the IAEA, the NEA, and the president's executive order wasn't just focused on domestic deployments. It's about how U.S. nuclear leadership is a national security imperative and how we go on offense globally and compete with competitors like China and Russia. How is the NRC working with other regulators globally, working with countries that are wanting to maybe start fresh new nuclear plans so that we're fostering a market for U.S. products? Obviously, we want to build it here, but then ultimately build that order book both here and abroad.
Yeah. Let me start with just a broader context that I think is important to understand why NRC really matters, and then I'll transition over to how NRC is working with other regulators. Consider this, in the last 30 years, almost 60 reactors have come online in China. In the United States, only 3. Right? That's not just a statistic. That is a strategic gap that America has to close. And I was thinking about Senator Hagerty's opening, talking about PowerPoint presentations. I'll share you another anecdote here. Recently, our international programs team at the NRC met with a country looking to deploy new nuclear. And their government officials told the NRC plainly they want a power plant, not a PowerPoint. They will not buy a reactor that hasn't been licensed by the regulator and operating in the country supplying it. Today, many countries, including our allies, are considering reactor technology partners. If the United States cannot deliver, they will buy foreign reactors and accept the geopolitical leverage that they carry. That's why NRC matters. We have to deliver credible, predictable, and timely regulatory decisions for our technologies in the United States that are being deployed at places like Oak Ridge National Lab, at Clinch River, the Hermes site as well, and some of the other construction projects happening in Texas and Wyoming. NRC's role is so important to our nation's national security on the global stage when it comes to nuclear energy. So how are we working with other regulators? We are doing things that I had been thinking about when I was at the Nuclear Energy Agency back in the 2015 to 2018 timeframe, about multilateral licensing work, where you have mature regulators that understand the technologies. They have very solid regulatory programs and competent staff, that moving to a paradigm where regulators can work together on a single technology that is maybe being looked at in each country to develop regulatory positions or even decisions that can be used toward licensing. So you don't have to license a plant 3 separate times for 3 countries. You come together in a multilateral fashion, again, taking the decades of expertise and the competent staff and the similarities in the regulatory frameworks to work more efficiently. So we have strategic partnerships with Canada, the Canadian Nuclear Safety Commission, and the Office of Nuclear Regulation in the United Kingdom, looking exactly at that model here, where we're taking specific technical topics for certain reactor designs that are being considered in each of those countries and developing regulatory work together in positions that could be used not only by those 3 countries, by our 3 countries, but by other regulators in the future as well. So this is really a paradigm that we're moving toward, globally speaking. And there's been a lot of discussion over the decades I've been involved in the international world about harmonizing regulatory requirements. There are certainly opportunities to do that, Jeremy, but sometimes I think we focus so much on where we're different, we forget
Hmm.
how similar we really are when it comes to nuclear safety requirements. Obviously, things like emergency preparedness and security are going to be very different uh, country to country, but the fundamentals of nuclear safety and the physics and science behind it, they don't really change, right? And
Right.
how you get to the decision, yes, there may be some different approaches for that, but generally speaking, I think we're maybe more similar than we really believe ourselves to be. So I think there's certainly an opportunity to continue to pursue this multilateral licensing concept.
Yeah. You mentioned the Canadian regulator and the unique
Yeah.
partnership there. Maybe to get a double cloak on this topic, the GE Vernova BWX 300 is a good example, right? Under
Hmm.
construction in Canada today, the administration announced a deal with Japan and the Department of Commerce to try to accelerate deployment in Tennessee and Alabama in a pretty quick follower stage. How is the NRC and the Canadian regulator, generally like kind of sharing information and trying to find those synergies so that we could be the fast follower in these cases?
Very, very regularly, we're doing that. We have a memo of understanding with the Canadian regulator. In fact, it was something that I was involved with putting in place when I was a director of NRR. We were sending teams of people to the CNSC and vice versa to identify areas of collaboration. Now we are focused on very specific topics related to the GE BWRX 300 so that as we are moving through our review of the construction permit, we're learning from what the Canadians are doing. They're starting to build that project now up in Darlington. In fact, I'm going to be visiting that site in July to see how that project's going. And we have our folks also witnessing their activities as well. So again, we do not have to reinvent the wheel anymore in nuclear energy here, right? We have a very robust network of international cooperation around the world, and there's information that we receive from other regulators and that we share with other countries as well. And organizations like the IAEA and the Nuclear Energy Agency, they do play important roles in facilitating that level of international cooperation, so that we don't have to reinvent the wheel on some of these issues.
Excellent. Well, I know, Mr. Chairman, we only have you for 10 more minutes here before I think you have to depart with us. So, got maybe a quick question to shift topics, and then I want to do a couple rapid fires for you as well.
Yeah.
Um, there's a lot of interest in fusion. ClearPath, I mentioned, works broadly on technology, nuclear fission, one of our primary focuses, but also fusion as well. And the NRC has taken some unique actions here in the last year or so to really prepare for that moment as private sector investment is going in that sector as well. Could you talk a little bit about the proposed rule on fusion and the approach there? Yeah, I'd be curious to hear a little bit more of your perspective there.
Yeah, yeah, I would love to. It's really great to see that fusion is closing in on net energy gain. I've met with a lot of fusion companies since I've taken the role as chairman to learn about their technologies and how they're developing toward commercializing their fusion machines. And as you know, we launched a regulatory framework this past spring in March that lays out a regulatory framework that would go through really the Part 30 pathway and even have the ability for an agreement state to regulate the hazard. We believe that's the right approach, and I'm excited about it. And the way I would say it is that when the technology is ready for licensing, the NRC will be ready. We are still moving forward on resolving the comments that have come in on the draft rule, and we are targeting finalizing that rule sometime in early 2027.
How are you approaching staffing prioritization at the agency for the technical competencies you need across these technologies, right? Whether it's fission or fusion, multiple different types of designs on the advanced nuclear side, and there's significant competition with the industry, right? There's a lot of
Yeah,
private
yeah.
money going in, which is a great thing. And we're all fighting over the same workforce. How are you thinking about that from a staffing perspective and really preparing so that you can get this influx of new projects coming through the pipeline?
I'm thinking about it all the time, working with the senior leaders at the agency. One of the important things that I took away from my time in the industry, which I think is a strength of this industry, is what they do for leadership and talent development. Developing leaders, that is core business for every leader in this industry, including the regulator. We have to develop the future leaders of this agency. Similarly, we've got to ensure that we have a strong talent pipeline coming into the agency and that they're developing the technical competencies that they need, right? We have new materials being considered for these reactors, new fuel types, right, and different technologies. So we're working on building the bench strength in those technical areas, and we have to step up our ability to recruit, retain, and train our people. So we're taking steps there. We're looking at the compensation frameworks for our staff, trying to make some adjustments there, working with our Senate congressional authorizers and appropriators in that regard. We are also, obviously recruiting both at the entry level. We stepped up our intern program. We call it the Nuclear Regulatory Apprenticeship Network. We actually increased the size to 30 classmates this time around, and we're going to do one every year. And NRC is a great place to work. For those on the webinar today, please let people know NRC is hiring. Get the word out, and it's exciting to really be at the regulator at this moment in time for nuclear energy. But we're really doing a lot, Jeremy, in that area to really shore up our workforce. We have lost some people there, but I will say this. We are being more efficient in how we do our business. Again, going back to what I said before, our safety focus is not changing. We're not lowering any standards. What we are doing is looking at how we make our decisions and how we execute our programs. And that is really being driven by focusing on what is most important, safety. I did see just a quick thing come up in the chat related to the oversight program about adjustments there. I do want to address that up front because I think it's important for the American public to know here. The inspection is still strong and being maintained. The reason why we can reduce the level of oversight is because we have duplication in inspection procedures. We have procedures that are looking at very low risk activities that are actually distracting the regulator's attention and the industry's attention. So when you have a high performing industry that you're regulating, you want to focus on the things that are most significant and not distract from their ability to stay at that high performance level. So I am 100% confident in the NRC staff and the regions and what they do on a day-to-day basis to ensure that the nation's facilities continue to operate with high levels of safety and reliability.
Excellent. All right, with our last couple minutes, I've got a couple rapid fire for you. A lot of attention given to Part 53, for example. But of the rulemakings that are underway, what is one that is underappreciated by the outside world, and why does it matter more than people actually realize?
Well, so let's say, what is underappreciated? I think it hasn't been published yet, but it will be soon. I may give you a couple, it'll give you a picture of the magnitude of the changes. We are making major changes to how we execute our responsibilities under the National Environmental Policy Act, NEPA. And as you know, there's a safety review, and then there's an environmental review that goes along with every licensing activity. So we are taking a change to how we do NEPA to focus on what is required by statute, nothing more, nothing less, and focusing really on the radiological consequences that may arise from a particular licensing action. And we've looked at additional categorical exclusions to really bring some discipline and efficiency into how we do NEPA. And this really builds on the Fiscal Responsibility Act in 2023 to really streamline how we do NEPA. So we will fulfill our responsibilities as required by law, but it will not introduce any unnecessary delays in doing so. So I think that's one that's going to move the needle a lot in terms of timeliness. The other thing that may be underappreciated, but again, folks haven't seen it yet because we haven't published it. We have made some major proposed revisions to Part 50, which will not only be available to new reactor licensees that come in under Part 50 if they do a construction permit and an operating license, but the existing fleet today. And one anecdote that I always share is that in this revised Part 50 rule that will be published later this year, we are actually building in a lot of risk-informed initiatives that were being worked on 20 years ago. There was one actually fascinating regulatory program that we developed, we're working on in the early 2000s that I actually worked on. It never made it through the system because of the institutional friction around the issue. But think about it this way. Like I'll just try to preview it without getting into the details. They're using risk information and data from inspections ongoing at operating nuclear facilities. We're enabling programs that will basically allow an existing reactor to relook at what they are licensed to in terms of the design basis and licensing basis events. And some of the events that are well known and understood to be highly improbable events, those that there will be an option to not have to include that in the licensing basis. And that actually will trickle down into technical specifications and other licensing programs to remove, again, unnecessary conservatisms in the licensing basis for the operating fleet today. So this is amazing stuff. Like I really can't talk enough about some of the rules. I love Part 57. It's a very innovative approach for, high volume deployment of microreactors. I think a lot of folks have really liked what they've seen so far, but some of the hidden gems, I think, are, some of the ones that I'm mentioning to you here.
Last quick one here. 2 years from now, what would make you say, I moved the ball in my tenure here as chairman?
Well,
Hopefully
I
longer
would
than two
say
years, but
to me, I
let's say
I
two
will
years.
always make it we. I want the agency to be seen as a model for the United States government. When people say, "Wow, the NRC is a model for federal regulation in the United States of America," that will be great. I would say with some more precision. We have talked about, things going vertical, shovels going into the ground. Absolutely, that would be an indicator that NRC is doing something right. But I would say NRC success shouldn't be measured just by the number of applications it receives or the number of rules it changes. It needs to be measured by the decisions it's delivered and the time frame that they've delivered them in, right? And those decisions are really that first safety decision from the regulator. That's really kind of the main starting point to really get things to go vertical. So I would measure the success of the NRC in terms of what it actually delivers, not what it's actually just put in place.
Absolutely. We all do this. So there's more
Yeah,
steel put in the ground and we're generating more electrons from nuclear power. Well,
yeah.
Mr. Chairman, very much appreciate it. I think Lucian wants to wrap us up here, but I just want to thank you for your leadership. I mean, I think the country is truly lucky to have you here serving in this critical moment and what is such an exciting time for U.S. nuclear power. So thank you.
Thank you, Jeremy.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I know you've got to go. Jeremy, if you can just stay on for just a minute. I
Sure.
know the chairman's got a train to catch, so thank. I'm hoping he can still listen in, but there you go. I
Yeah.
just want to say thank you for your time, Mr. Chairman. I know you got to go, but Jeremy, can you just stay on for just a minute?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Thank you, Lucian. It was my pleasure to be here. Have a great day.
Yes, sir. Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you, sir.
So, Jeremy, first of all, there's three things I picked up on the last half hour. So, number one, you asked the best lightning round questions that I've ever heard. So if we've got to have you back on because I think just in the last 5 minutes, seeing the chairman's enthusiasm for what they're trying to do with reform within the NRC and regulations is refreshing. You and I know we've both been in this industry for a long time, and the NRC, when it was created in the 70s, wasn't necessarily created to encourage the nuclear industry. It was set up post safety concerns coming out through Mile Island. And my concern with the NRC over the last 30 years, it has done a lot to be a barrier to entry for a new company. Now you've got 60 companies all wanting to do an NRC license and eventually they're going to have to get that cut down. But
Sure.
what I found really enlightening, Jeremy, about your interview with the chairman, I'd love to get your comments, is it what you're hearing, I think, for the first time is an organization that realizes that they are part of a compelling need. They are a very important part, which is the safety review, but they are part of a bigger issue, which is we need more power in this country. And you have an NRC chairman saying, what can I do to meet this national imperative? As opposed to what, we are going to do to making sure no matter what, these reactors are safe. I still picked up on the priority for safety, but I also picked up on we know we have a role to serve for this country that for nuclear power. What was your impression on that?
You know, we're seeing it top to bottom, right? From the staff that we're meeting with on individual rulemaking all the way up to the chairman. You see this enthusiasm, this excitement about this moment. Like I think you underscored it right there, Lucian. Like people are excited to be part of something that I think is going to change the globe. It's going to change the future trajectory of our country, and they recognize the gravity of that, right? Like that they've got to do this in a diligent way. That we need a nimble, efficient regulator that's driving safety and ultimately the deployment of this technology, which can help us meet our economic goals and our national security goals. And I think we're seeing that across government too. It's not that just the NRC. We heard a lot of it from Senator Hagerty, but there is not a technology area that has more bipartisan support and enthusiasm. And it's really this confluence of private sector investment, regulatory modernization, private sector entrepreneurs that are hitting key milestones and moving forward. And it makes me more and more excited about the going vertical in many different places in this country and putting steel in the ground.
Yeah, and I think there's a couple of things he really emphasized. Look, there are some questions in the chat, legitimate questions. How can you reduce your workforce and still maintain your priority for safety? I think the chairman did a good job as far as looking at what are our inspectors doing? How to ultimately do we make them more productive on an individual basis? So I think that's still a legitimate question. Where does the NRC have workforce deficiencies or gaps? We can work on that together as far as, okay, how do we promote, what can be done to close those gaps? As you know, I'm a big believer in technology. Digital twinning, I think, is the way to go within the NRC. We'll do some follow-up work there. The bigger issue here, and Jeremy, you and I and Nico and others within ClearPath have talked about picking winners. I think we do eventually have to talk to the industry needs to say, we can't have 60 companies going in for an NRC license. We've got to figure out which ones are the most worthy of a path to deployment. So that's something I think that, or I hate to say a clear path to deployment, but the bottom line here is that's what I think we're doing. It's a time to pick winners. Your perspective on that?
Yeah, I think there's going to be a natural down selection. I think it's exciting that there's a bunch of companies in the queue that are coming forward. I think we're going to see three key things drive like the companies that are going to go from first and second of a kind to actually commercially scaled up. Who can lock in off-takers, right? So customers for this product. To who can attract the private sector investment to scale, because while the government is putting a lot of resources behind scaling these technologies now, it's not going to be forever, right? Like we need to get over the kind of first of a kind and get into that first wave of the order book, and then it's going to need to take off. And then some of it's going to be technical, right? Like inherently, like these designs are going to have to find a way to not only be successful but be cost competitive in electricity markets as a whole. And so I think the combo of private investment, customers, and the entrepreneurial milestones are going to ultimately down select us to a handful of new technologies. But I think there is an immense opportunity here, and this is not a scenario where we need to pick one U.S. product. I think there is room in this market for a wide variety of technology offerings that fill different niches.
Yep. No, I know when one last question, I'll let you go because of the fact that this is unscripted. We did not anticipate we'd be talking to each other, so I appreciate you staying on for a little bit extra time.
Of course.
When the executive orders came out, 4 of them in May of 2025, I know your team, my team, we looked at them and going, oh my Lord, there are some pretty aggressive goals here. And it's like, how can we have, July 4th, 2026? How can we have, the 28, 29, and the 30? But it's incredible, but it just may happen. And it's like, okay, I think the chairman said it right. The president put some pretty aggressive goals. We got to cut through the red tape. We got to actually start putting shovels in the ground. I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit. So we within UCAN Power have started to write what should be in the fifth executive order. And we're going to try to get that done before the July 4th deadline, get that out in the public. And we're going to be running our ideas through your team as well.
Sure.
Just I'm putting you on the spot. What would you like to see in a fifth executive order if you were writing it for the president right now?
Yeah. Well, first I would say I think stretch goals are important. I think that's fundamental. Like you set a target out there to drive forward and being ambitious, I think that drives government and drives enthusiasm. It makes people part of a larger mission. And so I think the initial EOs were such a critical part to aligning government around how we accelerate deployment. If I'm thinking about a fifth executive order, it's about building the order book, right? Like there's a lot of incredible work that's happening right now. Just yesterday, the big announcement from DOE, LPO, or now called the Energy Dominance Financing Tool on AP1000s, the milestones we're sitting. There are a variety of things that we need to do in different electricity markets to really build out the issues. And we still have some regulators and state entities and investor-owned utilities that are nervous about previous cost overruns and things like that. And so I really think that next EO should be about how do we go from these first waves where we're seeing some immense success to 10, 20 plus reactors in this realm in the long run. And I think setting that out is going to be long-term durable policy because I think there's strong bipartisan support, Republicans and Democrats in Congress and across the energy ecosystem that see the immense potential nuclear can provide and ultimately giving us clean, affordable, reliable electrons and heat. I think we might have lost Lucian, David.
Yeah, yes, I believe that is true. So hopefully come back on. But thank you. I think we got your answer. So that's and thank you so much for leading the really interesting discussion with our chairman. So appreciate what you're doing. Appreciate everyone being part of this discussion. And uh, we'll get ready to close the discussion now. Thank you very much, Jeremy.
Yeah, absolutely. No, thank you all for hosting this. And I think it's a really important conversation to both with our leaders in Congress and with the chairman of the NRC in this exciting moment. And just know, we're here at ClearPath. We're here to work with all of you who are marching through this incredible moment for U.S. nuclear and ultimately driving forward deployment of new, clean, affordable, reliable power.
Very good. Lucian, I'm gonna hand it back to you. You're on mute.
All right, there you go. I think the Chinese just intervened right there, and I'm so sorry about that. I got cut off from the world. I'm in a skip, so that probably explains it. Jeremy, thank you for your time. One last thing before we go. We and UCAN make a lot of good decisions. I can't think of a better one than asking you to interview the chairman. So just your background knowledge and expertise where you can roll so quickly through a whole range of issues with the chairman was absolutely stellar. It's better than anybody else could have done within UCAN Power. So thank you for your continued leadership and expertise. And it was a joy to listen to your discussion with the chairman. So thank you.
Thank you. You're very kind and appreciate the partnership with you all. So thank you for all your leadership.
All right. Okay, so go ahead and let you drop off. So again, we're going to put some slides up. Once again, for those of you still on, want to thank our sponsors. Again, we don't take developer sponsors for our work. We do, but we do take it to underwrite the production costs of our webinars and our podcasts. So again, a big thank you to Cybernetic Intelligence as a sponsor, also to ALO and to Atomic B for covering the production costs of this and the podcast. If you want to sponsor future events or future webinars or future podcasts, please get a hold of us at UCAN Power on our website. We're up over what, David, 40 podcasts we've done? If you want to throw that slide up there. But we continue every week to interview nuclear industry leaders from across the board, government, private sector, developers. So I just want to say, if you would like to speak on a future podcast, get a hold of us. If you would like to sponsor this important exchange of expertise and information, please let us know. But we will continue. I think we've got another, 8 or 9 lined up. We will be at 50 within the next couple of months, right? As far as podcasts. And a lot of folks come back after the fact to listen to our podcast and hear from industry leaders. So please, for those online, if you want to participate, get more interested in our podcast and what we do with the webinars, please get a hold of us. One last thing is there is a lot of information on the UCAN Power website. to include a recent Department of War report that we lay out in very easy fashion, everything that's going on in the Department of War with nuclear power. I know the chairman was recently over at the Pentagon just the other day, talking with DOW leaders. So I just want to let everybody know, check out our website. We've got a one-pager. We've got other information on there as far as staying current, what's going on within the Department of War and also with the larger industry. So on behalf of Dave Charrington, Jeff Crater, and Chris Plotch, Lucian Niemeyer signing off. Thank you for everybody that has joined us. And more importantly, please take the video that will go out and pass it around to your network. I think there was some important content here from Senator Hagerty. Once again, thanks Senator Hagerty for coming on board, and again, Chairman Nieh. And I'm hoping everybody on this call found it incredibly beneficial to spend the last hour and 15 minutes with us. Anything more, David, for us to close out?
Great discussion. Great hour and a half. Thanks very much.
All right, everybody, we're going to close out a little bit early, give some time back. Thank you all. Have a fantastic day.